Hey folks, we'll do this every once in a while and take a cinematic look back and set the record straight on some of the most beloved films in cinema that somehow managed either to masquerade as good films or blatantly pull the wool over the eyes of the unwashed masses. So, without further ado, and in no particular order, here are 5 of your precious favorite films that are actually crap. Volume 1.
Say hello to my little friend!
I wanted a mission. And for my sins, I gave you once.
Echoes of eternity.
Number 1, Braveheart. Actor-director Mel Gibson's bloodthirsty, historically inaccurate account of the life of Scottish warrior legend Sir William Wallace was every Scotsman's wet dream when it came out in 1995. As little more than a chest-thumping vanity project for Mr. Gibson, this feels like really a 3-hour exercise in watching a cat lick itself. Boasting a ridiculous big hair mullet, Mel looks like Fabio's short half-brother Lou, the boat mechanic. Gibson's Scottish via Melbourne accent has famously been touted as one of the worst in film history. It never feels right, and it fades in and out with the frequency of a cheap Lithuanian transistor radio. Word has it that the night before shooting, Gibson had dinner with Sean Connery to nail down the accent. I suspect all they nailed down were a few tumblers of bourbon and a couple of prime rib steaks. But maybe that was for the good. I mean, can you imagine? Before we let you leave, your commander must cross that field, present himself before this army, put his head between his legs, and kiss his own arse. Maybe not such a great idea. With a grating soundtrack, if it's not hammering you with god-awful bagpipe music, we get sappy, cliched musical swells that personally make me want to hurl, all in an effort to amp up lingering shots of Gibson's flowing mane and Windex blue eyes. And as the story unravels, Gibson's character arc goes from smart-ass frat boy to full-on Martin Riggs mode. I mean, I guess something about the long hair brings out the beast in Hollywood's favorite anti-Semite. I wonder what hair he was sporting when he left those messages for his ex-wife.
Provocatively dressed all the time with your fake boobs you feel you have to show off in tight outfits and tight pants that you see your
As for the historical accuracy, if that's what you're looking for, then you came to the wrong motherfucking film, my friends. Look, I'm not usually a stickler for this stuff. I allow for some creative license here, but Judas Priest, even the title is a balls up. The name Braveheart is actually associated with Robert the Bruce, for Christ's sakes. Furthermore, Gibson's Wallace is actually shown doing the down and dirty with future Queen of England Isabella of France. Wow, seriously? Truth is, the two never actually met, and if they had, as the film suggests, after the Battle of Falkirk, then Isabella would have been just 3 years old. Jesus, Mel. As well, Mel's iconic blue face paint sure looked pretty cool, but in reality was about 1,000 years too late, and his tartan kilt, 500 years too early. Oh, and the Battle of Stirling Bridge portrayed in the film, it's missing one key element, an actual bridge. And so the film lurches to its inevitable sadistic end as devout Catholic Mel gets to have his ultimate wet dream realized as he's strapped to a cross a la you-know-who and eventually drawn and quartered, all the while bellowing, Back in '95, I'm guessing that Hollywood must have been inflicted with a brain freeze epidemic, as members of the Academy elected to bestow this mess of a film with nothing less than the Academy fucking Award, all the while absolutely ignoring the vastly superior Heat with not even one lousy nomination. Idiots today and idiots back then. Fuck the Academy Awards. Number 2, Love Actually. This Richard Curtis-directed 2003 holiday nutty Christmas shit cake is 200 pounds of pureed donkey dicks shoved into a 10-pound sausage casing, smeared in Oktoberfest outhouse feces, drenched in maple syrup, baked for 20 minutes, then served on a bed of gravel with a brown-stained English grin to the unwashed masses. Good Lord, what a chore it was to sit through this garbage. Early on, this cringe fest has the temerity to actually reference the horrors of 9/11 before stating its central thesis that despite the horrors that appear to surround us, love is actually a more powerful and omnipresent force that can be found everywhere if you just open your eyes and look for it. And then we're off to the races with no less than half a dozen stories of imbeciles looking to get porked, in a few cases by their actual subordinates in the office. Filmed in that cheesy day-glow look present in a number of UK rom-coms that makes one wonder if they haven't actually entered through the saccharine gates of Candyland, Love Actually boasts an embarrassment of acting talent sabotaged by putrid, go-nowhere storytelling and cringe-inducing dialogue. We have Hugh Grant woefully miscast as a newly elected British Prime Minister who looks about as comfortable and qualified for the job as a hairdresser named Lewis at a baseball bat factory. Here, having the hots for his rather young tea lady, who disturbingly looks a little like Monica Lewinsky. The bland Emma Thompson is an uninteresting housewife who loses her shit and balls at the sound of Joni Mitchell's voice. She's married to Alan Rickman, who resembles a dry librarian named Goethe. Colin Firth is along for the ride, playing the same nice guy English dork they'd practically invented. Firth is like every third-wave feminist's life crisis moment. He checks off every sensitivity box in the Dream Man list, yet is still completely without a scintilla of sexual appeal. Liam Neeson, just 5 years before realizing there was more cash to be made murdering scores of Bulgarian thugs, where he plays a newly divorced dad giving the worst love advice ever to his preteen son who's looking to score with his elementary school crush. And Keira Knightley, the champion of yet incredibly hot woman, does her typical thing, looking hot and arousing dicks in the audience. As well, a host of other known and unknown actors, including Billy Bob Thornton, pre-Butterfaced Laura Linney, and Rowan Atkinson, and the list goes on and on and on. And all of them wasted in this smoking turd of a circle jerk as director Curtis attempts to distract you from this mess by jumping about from one scene to the next with all the grace of a Zab Judah turkey dance. It's clear the creators of this sugary cock lollipop have decided the audience will just check their brains at the door and happily enjoy cornball melodrama mixed in with humorless gags lacking any semblance of a punchline. Take, for example, Chris Marshall's character of an ugly, uncouth office toady making horrendous sexual advancements on women, including some of his co-workers, where he decides to head off to the States where he believes that hot, easy American woman will swarm him due to his thuggish British accent. Well, his storyline vanishes through much of the film, and no doubt to squeeze in the multitude of other storylines. But eventually we see him landing in Chicago, having a cabbie drop him at some random dive bar, where of course he's immediately surrounded by 3 sizzling hot blondes that demand to take him home and share their single bed naked to keep warm, of course. Ha, 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 ha. Shecky Green must be rolling in his grave. Look, every year at Christmas, there's almost always going to be some idiot friend who'll recommend this saccharine cringe fest to me. I think I may just take them for a long walk into the wilderness this time, find an old broken dead branch somewhere, and beat them with it. Love Actually? Shit Actually. Hey folks, congratulations on making it to about the halfway point of this episode without being too offended by either my biting commentary or shitty Sean Connery impersonations. You might actually be afflicted by a keen sense of humor, friends. And if you're enjoying my critiques and, well, would like to contribute to the growth of Acid Test Cinema, then please do take a second to hammer that like and subscribe button, respectively. And if you think my opinions are batshit crazy or sweet manna from heaven, then by all means leave a comment below. Now back to the fun. Number 3, the Boondock Saints. How this shitty, piss-poor Tarantino knockoff gained a cult following in the early 2000s can only be attributed to the frat boy stoned on Bud Light and Cheeto dust who couldn't tell you the difference between a porterhouse steak and a can of Alpo if their worthless lives depended on it. The half-baked premise by Boston bartender turned filmmaker Troy Duffy centers around the McManus brothers, played by Sean Patrick Flannery and Norman Molemouth Reedus, who elect to quit their day jobs at the local meat packing plant to execute mafia types in cool slow-motion gunfights, because these bad guys oddly offend their Christian sensibilities. Somehow, this moronic premise got Harvey Hansi Weinstein so wet, he greenlit the picture only to eventually come to his senses and drop it. Sadly, the pic would eventually be picked up by Indican Pictures and produced with a much smaller budget. Honest to God, folks, I've drawn up better, more fleshed out premises while scarfing down a tomato on the shitter. The one good actor in this mess is Willem Dafoe, who despite giving it his all, can't lift or even escape the mountain of horse turd that permeates this mess. And Mr. Dafoe, who plays a gay cop on the trail of the brothers, only manages to embarrass himself as he struts and preens about like a femme rooster while coarsely deeming other gay men to be quote-unquote. His character arc here essentially has him spiraling from Sherlock Holmesian detective to a flat-out cross-dressing murderous lunatic. You'd think he would have seen the writing on the wall when even Ron the Hedgehog Jeremy shows up to smear his particular brand of sleaze into the mix. So we're treated to one scene of slow-mo shoot-ups after another, set against inane guitar riffs that are about as riveting as watching a squirrel raid a bird feeder. Director Duffy spectacularly fails to capture the nuanced quirkiness of Tarantino's characters with an assortment of random goofiness that feels directly pulled from the director's ass. For example, we get a scene where these two lunkhead brothers show off to a bemused Dafoe that they know like half a dozen foreign language. Dafoe is seriously impressed and wants to know how. Well, according to them, they just paid attention in school. Well, if that's true, then why on earth are they working as meat packers? So anyway, how does this talent for language pay off? It doesn't, but sure was a cool scene. Speaking of language, why does this story that supposedly takes place in the rough neighborhoods of South Boston barely have anyone with a Boston accent? Our two leads, apparently raised in the area, have Irish accents. They sound like a pair of idiot leprechauns. I mean, I get their ancestry is Irish, but why would that give them Irish accents? Again, I guess because it's supposed to be cool? Look, it's vital in every film for the rules of its world or universe to be established early on and adhered to. Now here there are no such rules, just whatever we think would be funny in the moment, we'll do that. So two morons with barely a hint of motivation elect to kill lots of bad guys, one shoot-up will follow the next, sometimes there'll be expert shots, and when we want to see a longer gunfight, they'll become the worst marksmen ever, missing guys who are just standing a few feet away. And please don't get me started on the Catholic symbolism here. Moronic swoons of choir music brought in a feeble attempt to add some deeper meaning to the proceedings. This is just 7 different shades of the same shit, folks. For anyone looking for an afternoon of bloody violence, mutilations, and black humor, there's got to be about 3 dozen better choices than this dreck. Number 4, Rambo, First Blood Part 2. Hot on the heels of his first hit film outside the Rocky franchise, that being First Blood, Sly Stallone in 1985 unleashed the orgasmic bloodbath extravaganza known as Rambo, First Blood 2. Look, First Blood wasn't exactly the deer hunter as an honest examination of the residual effects of the Vietnam War, but it was a pretty damn decent thriller action flick, a dark brooding journey into the damaged mind of a disenfranchised vet with some pretty great action set pieces. It worked. 3 years later, no doubt drunk on the sweet stench of his own roided up farts, and perhaps fueled by the jingoistic rah-rah Ronald Reagan years, Stallone went all in, turning John J. Rambo into a cartoon killing machine. And this time, helming the project, we have director and renowned Hollywood jerk George P. Cosmatos, who a couple of years later would shit out another crap Stallone vanity project, Cobra. So, 3 years after being incarcerated and forced to break boulders with a pickaxe, Rambo looks like he spent a little too much time in the prison hair salon and skipped one too many leg days. He now walks around like he has a rusty barbell shoved up his ass with his arms strapped to an invisible cross. Richard Crenna returns as his old boss, Colonel Troutman, and gives him a deal to have his sentence commuted if he'll only take on a suicide mission to take recon pics of American POWs in Vietnam. Now, Crenna's not a terrible actor, but it seems his sole purpose in these films is to give exposition about what a razor-blade-chewing, vicious badass Rambo is, and to make sure you don't piss him off or else, like you're gonna need a boatload of body bags and stuff. Then he simply fucks off, shows up later and wash, rinse, and repeat. So after getting briefed in what looks like the corner of a Walgreens stockroom by some lunkhead with a shit-eating grin and grotesque armpit stains, Rambo sets off to infiltrate Vietnam, where he'll, of course, ignore his orders to only take pictures. Did anyone really think he would only snap pics? And mow down every Asian actor and extra in Hollywood. Along the way, he meets his contact, Ko Bao, played by Julia Nixon, who looks like she just stepped out of the pages of a Maybelline ad, and Nixon sports the kind of offensive, cliched Asian accent you would expect to hear in a Jerry Lewis film. She helps Rambo eventually find these forgotten Americans in one of the camps, and then, of course, all hell breaks loose. Stallone maims, mows down, and explodes a staggering number of Viet Cong while uttering such insightful thoughts for the day as, "To survive a war, you have to become war." I guess because they were running low on Asians to kill, we also get some fresh bodies helicoptered in the form of a Russian platoon of sadistic assholes wearing hilarious-looking uniforms that look like they were purchased at Party City. So, as the Ruskies and Viet Cong head toward certain death in a search for Rambo, we get more fun scenes of him sneaking up and killing these guys that harken back to the first film, including one ludicrous moment where he disguises himself as a hill of mud. So needless to say, he gets the POWs back in a shot-to-shit Russian helicopter that looks suspiciously American. He threatens the life of the asshole lunkhead who looks an awful lot like the sheriff from the first film, then walks off into a field, to the god-awful cringy music of his brother Frank wailing some shit song called, of all things, Peace in Our Life. More like piece of shit in our life. Number 5, Solaris. If famed Russian auteur Andrei Tarkovsky has accomplished anything with this 1972 space slog of almost 3 hours, it's the creation of a visual antidote to insomnia. Lest you folks think I only punch down, let me set the record straight on a film that most cinema snobs will swear is brilliant, if only to bolster their standing amongst other pretentious fart sniffers like themselves. In truth, I can all but guarantee you most of them have never watched it a second time. To do so would be to willingly return yourself to an ice-cold coma where one dreams about barren passageways that resemble abandoned nuclear power plants, or the empty shelf spaces left behind when Walgreens pulls out of town. The story centers around space psychiatrist Chris Calvin, played by the Russian Barney Rubble Donatas Banionis. He's sent on a mission to a Ruski space station orbiting the ocean planet of Solaris. Apparently the crew was up to some batshit crazy behavior before pulling the plug on all communications. So naturally you send a shrink, I guess. Tarkovsky, realizing his visual effects department is run by talentless morons, elects to pretty much not show any of Calvin's spacecraft. This guy is looking to make a sci-fi film in outer space with barely any sense of there being any spaceships or anything. However, now we do see a bit of the station which looks like it was designed by 5-year-olds sniffing too much Elmer's glue, but that's pretty much it. So Kelvin arrives on board with zero reception party, and we get a tour of this absolute eyesore of a set that looks like it was constructed of pine and balsa wood. This thing is supposed to be orbiting a planet? I've seen outhouses that look more high-tech. Also of note, Kelvin's dandy wardrobe. Now this guy has just been flung across the galaxy and he arrives in a tight mesh tank top and a leather waistcoat. It looks like he's stepped out of the set of Cruising. Was he hoping to find a leather bar when he arrived? Anyway, he bumps into two other lunatics aboard the station played by actors you've certainly never heard of, and they all engage in odd behavior and long-winded talks about nothing. But we do learn the planet Solaris has been manifesting visitors to the station from the memories of those aboard. And so it's not long before Kelvin's dead hot little minx of a wife shows up, and holy crap, what's a shrink to do? A version 1 of his wife is thrown into a rocket by Kelvin and blasted into outer space. Now when version 2 shows up the next day, well, Kelvin elects to just go along with it. Or perhaps he just ran out of expendable rockets. Tarkovsky has some murky thoughts and philosophies about the nature of consciousness and identity, but much of it gets lost here, muddled by a laboriously slow narrative that doesn't appear to give a shit if you're interested or not. You know, it's an old film adage to never tell when you can show. Apparently, Tarkovsky would prefer to do both at his own pretentious glacial pace. Solaris has famously been called the Russian 2001: A Space Odyssey. Well, that's like calling Nickelback the Canadian Rolling Stones. Now, Kubrick's seminal film is an absolute triumph, a virtuoso of brilliant storytelling and indelible images with the cumulative effect of feeling downright spiritual. Solaris, just kind of feels like a cold shower in the dark. That is all.